How's it going, and welcome to episode 68 of On the Wire. Proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at On the Wire Pod. Of course, if you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, please take a second to let us know what you think. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. And I am once again joined by my co-host Kevin Hasting, who should be followed on the Twitter at Hasting Kevin. And Kevin, you haven't been watching any Royals games this weekend, have you? Because granted, there was a win involved, but I'm not sure the majority of those watching the games would recognize most of the players playing.
No, I did not get a chance to watch, actually, and I would have liked to. Some of these young players that stepped in this weekend are guys that probably have a future in Kansas City. Of course, Nick Pratto, everybody knows that name. Michael Massey is up and coming this season. Hinkland, there's some guys that would have been fun to watch, but unfortunately, I did not get a chance to.
Oh, that's too bad. I know I liked seeing Nicky Lopez's comment about the win on, I think it was on Friday's win. It was a very unselfish win. And so we'll just leave that comment where it lays. Nicky played. We have with us a very special guest that's going to help us out as we get through our FAAB considerations heading into the All-Star break. By the time you're listening to this, there's still going to be a Kansas City Royals team that's playing majority of minor leaguers in Toronto. But by the time we pass our FAAB, they'll all be back by after All-Star break. And you're going to need some new players on your team. So luckily we have with us Jake Halusker to help us break down the FAAB options as we have the weekend heading into the All-Star break ahead of us. Jake, of course, is half of the Rotosaurus High Stakes Heat podcast and is the 2019 NFBC Auction overall champion. So as it happens every once in a while, I like being surrounded by overall champions of some sort just to make myself feel a little bit smarter by osmosis. So luckily we have Jake and Kevin with me this time around. Make sure to follow Jake on the Twitter at the Dust Mite. You'll get an exact link for that in the show notes. If you're not following him already, make sure you click that and get on it. Later in the show, we'll talk to Jake about how the 2019 run differs from what he's experiencing in 2022. But for now, Jake, man, thanks for being here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me. I love this show. I know it's obligatory. You got to say it when you come on, but
you do listen.
Yeah, it's become appointment download for me on Sundays this season for sure. You guys do a great job. You brought on a lot of good guests before me. Hopefully I can live up to that. I'm really happy to be here. It's a tough week for FAAB, as we're going to find out. So I'm excited to dig into this with you guys.
Yeah, I think you'll do fine. Like I mentioned, you might be the fifth overall champion that we've had of various degrees, of various different formats on the show. So I think you at least have the resume to at least people should trust what you're saying for sure. Let's get right into it then, guys. Let's get into some news and notes, things to keep in mind as you're making your FAAB bids heading into All-Star break. As I tend to say, there's a lot of news, a lot of notes to talk about. We're not going to talk about them all. We tend to talk about things that may impact your considerations for FAAB this Sunday night. And so there are other podcasts that you should be listening to for all the rest of those news. And we'll get to that a little bit later. So Kevin, we'll get right into it though with an IL stint. Of course, let's start off with the negative. Jon Berti, some team's savior in a certain category, hits the IL with, of all things, a hurt groin that won't impact speed at all, I'm sure. What impact do you think his absence is going to have on the Miami lineup as a whole? And then specifically about Berti, if you were lucky enough to grab him before his little 28 stolen base streak, are you happy with what you have and kicking him to the curb, or are you holding on to him hoping that you can squeeze a little bit more out of that?
I think as far as the lineup for Miami goes, we're probably just looking at more consistent playing time for Joey Wendell. Brian Anderson was already getting consistent playing time, and this will solidify that. And Jorge Soler is back in the outfield. So I think the lineup is pretty much set, and Jon Berti may have been looking at a reduction in playing time as is. As far as Jon Berti, if you're lucky enough to roster him, I think you have to hold on for a little while and see what happens when he does get healthy. Yeah, he was awesome for our lineups where we have him, but if we were to let him go and he does come back right away and get anywhere close to the playing time he was getting and continues to do what he was doing on the base paths, you don't want to be handing that to somebody else. Of course, we can't hold on too long. If it looks like the injury is going to linger, as you said, a groin will affect speed. We got to see how that's going to work out. And the playing time may have become an issue anyway. We may be letting him go at some point, but I think for a little while, especially since we have a half week this week, that kind of buys us a little bit of time. I think you got to hold on for now.
I'll agree with that. For the most part, definitely 15s. I'm not dropping him to 15s. With the short week, as you said, as long as you have enough ABs that you're not taking zeros and you have somebody else to drop to fill that instead of Birdie, then you're hanging on to him. 12s for the most part, I'd keep him as well. Groin, yeah, it's not something that bodes well for speed, but I mean, with a guy that could be that league altering, I think you got to hang on and see what happens. Hopefully it's a short stint for him. I'm not going to lie, I'm breathing a little sigh of relief in my main because the guy that's in first in my main event did grab John Birdie and rocketed past me to the top of the leaderboards. He needs to get knocked down a peg. So
just slow down a little bit. All right, guys.
Not that I cheer for injuries or anything like that, but
no, you just cheer for your opponents doing relief, poorly. Let's move on we'll stay Miami. You know what? We'll move into the pitching categories. And Miami ended up calling up Max Meyer, called him up to start today as we're recording this on Saturday. I feel like we've had at least one, if not multiple, high name prospects, even with the major changes to the collective bargaining agreement to induce some prospects to be called up a little bit earlier than they might have, your Spencer Torkelsons of the world and whatnot. But we still seem to be getting major names coming up throughout the course of the year, and we're in July now. So Max Meyer is the latest, one of the latest ones here, at least on the pitching side. How long does he actually stick in the Marlins rotation, though, to make him fantasy relevant for our consideration?
This is a big one. A lot of people were holding on, waiting for this one, and then he got injured. I want to say it was mid-May, and some people even held on in the main. He's 17% rostered in the main event NFBC. I believe that's 9 leagues, 8 or 9 out of 47. That's pretty incredible that people would hold on to a guy like that. Granted, he's a top talent pitching-wise, but that's 3.5 months of holding on, so you better hope you're getting something out of him. You held him for that long. Yahoo owners got the jump. He's up to 42% in Yahoo, but that's a lot of daily leagues, so they probably rolled him today. Got his 5.1 innings and 5 earned against
Congratulations
the Phillies,
on that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, he didn't look too bad with 3 homers, though. That was pretty much the damage. Or 2 homers, I'm sorry. 2 homers and some inherited runners. In terms of staying power, I mean, they didn't send down anybody they ultimately care about. Daniel Castano is not of Max Meyer's ilk. It's really how Edward Cabrera comes back, I would say. If Meyer does this 2 or 3 more times, then I would assume he's definitely back down. But if he turns it around in the next start and Edward Cabrera comes back, it's entirely possible that Trevor Rogers could be the one that could be optioned down just to figure some things out, because his control has been pretty lackluster all year. It's the king of the I like to call it the almost negative quality start, the 5 1/3, 5 2/3, 3 earned, 4 walks, and like 4 Ks, and then he bows out and doesn't get you anything out of it. So as much as I like Trevor Rogers, it's entirely possible he's the one that gets sent down when Edward Cabrera is ready. And they still got Jesus Lazaro hanging around too. So it depends on how well Max Meyer does in these next 2 starts out of the All-Star break, I would say, once Cabrera is ready.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget is that after being drafted in 2020, there was a lot of talk about him actually being called up in that same season just because of the shortened season and what have you in the bullpen situation, at least were the rumors that I was hearing. So the fact that they were able to hold him down throughout the 2021 season and then not pull the trigger until July is in a way somewhat surprising. The fact that he's up now, I'm in agreement. I think that as long as he doesn't blow it, there's not much of a reason. They started his clock late enough in the season. They're going to get the quote extra year of control already past the Super 2. Unless he blows it completely, I could see him sticking around throughout the course of the season. And Miami, as good as they've been doing, I'm not quite pecking them into the NL wildcard spot quite yet. And so give him as much major league action as possible makes a lot of sense moving forward.
Really curious to see what kind of FAAB he goes for now after that start. I'm betting there were plenty of people that were hanging on to drop the hammer on him when he was coming up, because he was the entire time after he came back from injury in the minors, he was looking stellar. The only thing that he was really missing was length. He only went 2 starts all year in the minors of at least 6 innings. So that's the one knock on his minor league performance that you would hope he would not carry over. But I think most people that were holding on waiting for him are still going to be spending. Most people have about 200 or so left in the main event, I would say. FAAB dollars, 250, somewhere in there. And you're going to see 100 plus bids for him easy. You might even see some 200 plus.
All right, we will stick with some pitching with you, Kevin, but we will move to the AL East, where the Yankees are going to be without Luis Severino, who hits the IL. They do get back Jonathan Loaisiga, who returns, but as Aaron Boone said, he returns to their bullpen. So with Severino out, what kind of noticeable impact are you seeing out of the Yankees rotation after the All-Star break concludes?
Oh, we're going to see Domingo Germán back. He went 6 innings last night at AAA, last night being Friday. He's going to be back right after the break. It sounds like they're saying that was his last rehab appearance. 65 pitches, so he was very efficient in those 6 innings. So if they let him go 75 or so, we're probably looking at more at 5 innings in a return. Unfortunately, this will be his major league debut this season. So in NFBC formats, he's not available yet for FAAB this week. We won't be able to get him until after he makes an appearance, which if it is not next weekend, as it might not be, depending, probably will be. The Yankees have 5 games. We'll talk about that a lot throughout the show, I think. So we'll see him next weekend. As long as it's before Sunday, he'll be available next Sunday. He is 12% rostered on Yahoo, where, as Jake mentioned, you can, in a lot of leagues, you can make pickups daily, and people have started to add him there. But I think that's going to be the rotation for the Yankees going forward. And yeah, not much different there.
Wait, are you saying that nobody drafted Domingo Germán in the NFBC and have been stashing him all season waiting for this call up?
He is 4% rostered in main events. So
there it is.
Somebody has him.
Two teams.
2 teams got him.
I hope they're listening. Please tweet us if you are one of those teams. Want to know how much flexibility you have on your roster that you could stash Domingo Germán all season long, because you haven't been able to pick him up. You had to have drafted him. I hope for those 2 teams he does very well when he comes back, but then that's it. Just 1 start, that's well, and I do not need to see Domingo Germán do well after that. I'm sorry. All right, Jake, we'll move into the offensive categories. Over for the Cubs, Frank Schwindel, he returns from the IL. They made room for him by sending Anderson Simmons to the IL retroactive to July 11th with a shoulder strain of his own. Can we expect Schwindel to return to form that we saw in 2021, and to the lesser extent as we saw him after his quote-unquote send down to the minors, which lasted all of a day, and he actually never made it to Iowa, but he came back the next day, and he actually was doing pretty well after that for a while. Can we expect that, or have you lost faith?
I mean, maybe we can get that. I don't think we're seeing 2021 again. I drafted him in my main, and I think the 19th round in the off chance. As a corner infielder, he could be that again, but the skills are down across the board pretty much. Barrel's down from 8 to 5%. Max EV's down from 112.5 to 108.5. K percentage is up 4% from 15.8 to 20. Z contact's down 8% he's down below 80% Z contact now. He's just a guy. He might be hitting 5th or 6th for the Cubs, but come August, he might be a bench bat on another team. I think there's a very strong chance that he's shipped out. The Cubs aren't really going anywhere this year. They're going to continue retooling, not rebuilding. They're just going to retool, but they're going to, I can't imagine them keeping Schwindel. He's 30 years old. It's not like he's a prospect or anything.
Yeah, that's fair. And he should be a free agent. I believe he's only got the 1 year on his contract. Oh, no, excuse me. No, he's not a free agent until 2027.
Yeah, he's been in the minors pretty much till last year.
Right. So they've got him under plenty of control. So I could totally see him for that reason being a very valuable trade trip, because he's very inexpensive. He's only got $570 on his current contract. He's not even arbitration eligible. And so, yeah, with that kind of
Maybe
control.
they'll keep him around for that reason. I don't know. He is cheap.
Yeah. Also very cheap to DFA if you absolutely need to as well. So a lot of options Cubs have on Schwindel right now. All right, Kevin, we will go back to the American League, to the Rays, where Luis Patino came back to the Rays, pitching 3 1/3 in his start on Thursday. Considering it was expected he would only go 1 or 2 innings, is this enough to pique your interest in stashing him for when he's fully stretched out?
Not really, actually. I like Luis Patino as a prospect. He's not a prospect anymore, but for future, I think he's going to be a nice pitcher in Major League Baseball. I'm not excited about him for the near future. That 3 2/3, he threw 56 pitches and only had 2 whiffs. We might not see him. His next start doesn't appear to be until about July 26th is when we'd look to see him. And that's if Tampa doesn't do their thing with Jalen Beeks and the rest of the bullpen doing a bullpen day. So we don't even know that he's going to get stretched out by Tampa in the first place. They keep bumping him up and down. And until we see something different, I'm not really excited in the near future. But at some point, I think he's going to be a good pitcher, but I'm not spending any resources on him right now.
All right. For both of you guys, we got a couple of IL returnees on different teams. Jake, we'll go to San Francisco for you. We got Jacob Junis coming back to the rotation there, and Evan Longoria coming back into mostly third base, of course, with Brandon Crawford making room for Longoria by heading to the IL himself. So with all these moves in San Francisco, what kind of impact can you see? Or is this just like way too much platooning as we normally see from Gabe Kapler in San Francisco for you to really blink an eye?
I'll knock Junis out of the way. He's back in the rotation. They've been using bullpen games as their 5th starter. I don't see any reason that he should not be owned in any 15-team league. 12's is a consideration. There's some very decent matchups in that division. He was performing pretty well before the injury, so I would take a shot on him if you got some room. But 15's definitely, if he's not on a roster, you should have him. Longoria is showing a decent amount of power right before the injury, and they're pretty want to play him most of the time. He was playing against some lefties as well, so he's not a platoon bat, I don't think, in Kapler's eyes, a full platoon bat. So if I'm looking for power, corner infield, I'm definitely going to take a shot there, 12s or 15s.
All right, and then Kevin, we'll go to St. Louis for you. Your IL update. We got Juan Yepez landing on the IL and sending Lars Nootbaar back to St. Louis to fill his spot. Yepez with a grade 2 forearm strain, so not sure how long that'll keep him out. So what kind of impact are you seeing? I remember hearing about Lars Nootbaar and Nolan Gorman and Juan Yepez. They're not going to be up at the Major League roster unless they're going to get regular at-bats. Obviously, with Yepez down, Nootbaar can come back up. That gives Nootbaar clear path to regular at-bats. So is this something that you're looking at for added plate appearances?
I am for this short week. Will they go to Cincinnati for 3 games? And it appears it will be all against right-handed starters. So we're not in jeopardy of having Albert Pujols as a designated hitter, at least to start those games. So I like Nootbaar for the first week out of the break. I think he's worth adding for that series with it being at Great American Small Park. So yeah, I like him for the week. And as far as going forward, he's the National League's 2022 version of Edward Olivares. He's been up and down quite a bit this season and for a couple of days at a time. So we'll see how that works out going forward. Grade 2 forearm strain. I was looking, it looks like anywhere from 10 days to 3 weeks is the typical time missed. So we will see Nootbaar this coming weekend in Cincinnati and maybe for another week or 2. So we'll have to keep an eye on or keep our ears open of what's going on with Yepez as he works on getting back.
Yeah, that's an important point in this short week. Sorry, Adam. Like I said before, maximizing your at-bats in good matchups. You might have a couple of guys that you're rostering that are short side platoon in a deep league. Nootbaar could be a really good way to alleviate that concern, at least for the weekend, because he's got Corey Dickerson there and Tyler O'Neill is back taking up a roster spot, but there is a really good chance Nootbaar is playing 2 of those 3 games, if not all 3. So yeah, that's a really good one, Kevin.
Yeah, at first, for a second, Jake, I thought we were going to make the exact same point, so I'm glad we didn't. Just something to consider the fact that these IL stints, these 10-day, these 15-day IL stints are 10-day, 10, 15-day IL stints. They're not 10 games. So this All-Star break counts toward that. So these very minute injuries that we're seeing people being placed on the IL for, they're not gonna miss a whole lot of games in this situation. So that's something to keep an eye out for as well. And also, Kevin, I need to make a correction. Sorry, that's All-Star Albert Pujols that we were talking about. Let's just make sure we get that.
I'm all for that, but he should only be in the starting lineup with the left-handed starter on the mound.
We'll just, however you feel about that rule, tweet us that one too, because I'm curious to see what more and more people think about that. Miguel Cabrera and Albert Pujols being all-stars this year. I guess the only thing I'll say on top of that, though, is I don't know that they have to play. Like, I know the rule is that the commissioner could add them to the roster as like future Hall of Famer all-star players, but I don't think they have to play in the game. I think technically they just have to be on the roster.
They can put him in to start the inning and then let him walk off to the adulation of the fans.
There you go. Give them their send-off. Yeah. All right, we're going to end it with another speed topic. As we started with John Birdie, Jake will end it with Estuary Ruiz being called up in San Diego. Obviously a speedy ad here in their infield, playing outfield for San Diego now, but at least in my Yahoo league, he was already second base eligible as well. So talk to me about your interest level, if any, in Ruiz this weekend, is for nothing else as a replacement for John Birdie.
Yeah, we've been burying the speed lead here. He's going to be highly sought after just because it's a limited commodity. I don't see him getting out of the bottom of the lineup for the Padres. He's never hit higher than 7th since he's come up. Hard hit rates are really low in the minors, sub 20%, I believe. But the speed is elite. It's a shot you could take if you need to. I feel like he's going to go for more than he's worth, though. I think he's going to be a $75 to $100 ad in $1,000 FAAB leagues, and I don't know if he's worth that. You've seen how they've jerked CJ Abrams around. You got Will Myers that's going to be coming back soon. It's a middling offense once you get out of the top 3 or 4. So there's not any RBI upside. There's not a lot of power upside. It's a little bit better what you hoped for Miles Straw in the beginning of the year. I don't know. I don't think he's going to be going for what he's worth. I think he's going to be overbid.
Yeah, the cautionary tale, you nailed it, was CJ Abrams as he was called up. And not only the playing time question marks in San Diego for him, but just the lack of opportunity or taking advantage of opportunity on the base pass. So I do wonder how much they're going to utilize him there. Obviously, he's already gotten his 1 stolen base. He's already been caught stealing at the major league level. He's had a pretty good percentage success rate throughout his minor leagues. Something else to consider, and obviously this doesn't really affect Ruiz as he's shown plenty of speed throughout the last 4 or 5 years in the minors. But with the pitch clock in AAA now, it has really affected base running in general. It makes it a lot easier on would-be base stealers to take advantage of those situations as a pitcher really has more to think about getting the ball over the plate in time with the clock, not being able to pick off or have enough time to throw a lot of pickoff attempts at first base. So there's Tucker Davidson had a long tweet thread earlier on in the season talking about his experience on this. And I think it's really insightful. It's worth looking into. And Ruiz had 23 stolen bases in AAA and 37 stolen bases before. Yeah. That's this year. So he's still, regardless of a pitch clock, he's still got the speed to do it. But so does CJ Abrams. CJ Abrams is just as fast, or at least in the same ballpark as Ruiz. And you really haven't seen the Padres take advantage of that at the major league level too much. A cautionary tale, if nothing else, to consider.
They don't run a lot as a team.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for our news and notes section of this episode. As always, I'm sure we missed a bunch of stuff worth noting. Keep up with all the news of the day. Make sure you're listening to the First Pitch podcast with Chad Young, Scott Chu, Daniel Port, and Kevin Hasting. They break down the news, highlights, and observations for every day's worth of games, as well as they look ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy league that day. In just a moment, we're going to talk to Jake about his experience in winning his 2019 auction championship overall. Before we do that, we're going to take this quick break.
Hey, Alex Fast here, and thanks for listening to this podcast on the Pitcher List Podcast Network. If you're a fan, consider supporting all of us by getting a PL Plus subscription, where you're going to get an ad-free website and get access to our Discord, where you can talk to all of our podcast hosts and staff. Plus, you can hang out with our incredible Pitcher List community. It's basically a baseball sanctuary year-round for as low as $8 a month. You can sign up at pitcherlist.com/plus, and you're going to get your first month free with promo code podcast. Also, don't forget to check out everything else we do as well, from YouTube videos, live streams, newsletters, off-season articles, TikToks, breakdowns, over 15 baseball podcasts on our network. We can't stop talking about baseball even during the off-season. So sign up for PL Plus today at pitcherlist.com/plus and use promo code podcast to get your first month free. All right. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show.
All right, and we are back. Thanks for joining us. You are listening to On the Wire. I am Adam Howe, joined by Kevin Hasting and Jake Halusker, the 2019 NFBC Auction champion overall. Jake, I want to talk to you about that season. It was a magical season, as we've talked to Kevin about his magical 2020 TGFBI overall champion. There are very few people who can hang their hat on that coat rack and say, hey, I've got that giant check. I've got my name on the board. Talk to me a little bit about how that season went. And what I'm mostly curious about is, it's been a couple of years now. We've had a weird 2020 season in between, but you've had a full 2021, and we're halfway through, or more than halfway through now, the 2020. Sorry, we had a full 2021, and we're halfway through the 2022 season. What did you take away from 2019 that you've been able to translate into success moving forward, and what is completely changed?
I'm glad to talk about this season, because it's starting to feel like ancient history with the way my auctions have gone the last 2 years. And Kevin can attest, because he's been in the last two leagues, and they have not gone nearly as well as that 2019 team. There are a few things that I hearken back to, and I played NFBC for quite a while, but I never had a run that deep into the year. And my overall aspirations were usually over by August. And something that I really took out of that year was, even with the success I had, you're going to make a ton of FAAB ads that don't work out. And I'm looking back now at everything that I picked up that year, all the players that I picked up, and it's probably 75% guys that I might have streamed for a week, guys that I picked up as specs and they didn't work out. There's probably 25 to 30% of these that actually were sizable parts of the success of that team. So if you're making these pickups and they're not working out, keep your head down. I know it's kind of cliche. Just keep at it. Keep streaming guys. Keep speculating. Use the room that you have in your roster and continue to churn. I had a couple big injuries that year, and injuries are a large part of this year too. A big injury didn't sink that season. I had Mike Clevenger as my ace on that team, and he was down for a good 3 months. And I thought that season was over in May when he went down. And it ended up working out, because I had a lot of guys that I drafted on the lower end in the dollar days that ended up working out that year. So keep picking up guys and try to move forward. I held on to Clevenger and it worked out. I had to drop Andrew McCutcheon that year and move forward. It didn't hold me back too much. There's a lot of talk about when to look at standings. Something else that, I'm a guy that's always looking at standings. Even in April, I'm looking at live scoring. I'm looking at standings. I'm looking where I am in the categories. I'm always taking stock of that. I'm not a guy that makes spreadsheets either. So I'm a fly by the seat of my pants type of guy. So I look at a lot of stuff, but I don't make a lot of records of it. I just keep it up in my brain. Use the overall standings as well as your league standings once you determine your team is good enough to compete. And that's something that I did with that auction team that I continue to do with any team that I think is good enough. Like my main event it was good enough, I thought, to compete for the overall. I don't think it's going to get that far now, but I'm still using the overall standings in the way that I'm making my free agent ads in addition to the league standings. I'm not saying throw your league standings out. You want to win your league first and foremost, but always look at where you are in those ratios. Look at where you are in wins and saves and Ks, and make sure you're not falling behind in anything that you can control. But I started looking at the overall standings in earnest for that 2019 team back in June. Once I determined in June that team was good enough, I was fixated on those overall standings in addition to my league standings. So utilize that tool. On the NFBC website, you go to the overall standings page and you can sort by categories rather than the points. So there is a pull down menu for that. So look at the overall categories. Always look at where you are. You want to be in that upper 80% of everything if you can. So make sure you're taking stock of all those things.
Yeah, I think it's...
as I said, the success hasn't been as good these last couple of years. Sorry. I feel like last year in the auction, I did not execute my plan at the draft table. And that was one of the big reasons that I don't think I did very well. Not that I didn't get good players. It was that I kind of hamstrung myself in terms of money. And it's not something that I like to do. This year, I feel like I executed exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't get exactly the players that I planned on getting, but the dollar values were there. And I'm somebody that doesn't like to have, $4 left for 3 players at the end. I like to have $7, $8 for 5 guys or 4 guys so that I have an extra dollar to bid on whatever I need. If somebody throws a guy out for 1, tries to sneak him through, I can get him for 2. And I feel like I did that really this year, but hasn't worked out. It was a lot of bad player analysis. I guess I'm pretty down in power and average and RBI in that league. So it's not been a good run the last couple of years. I'm not the ultimate authority on auctions, that's for sure. Winning an overall doesn't make you the best. Unquestionable success at a certain type of league. There's always ways that we need to grow. Just because it works once doesn't mean it's always going to work, but you got to keep trying.
Yeah, we see it year in year. I feel like it's happening a lot quicker, but we hear all these stories about back in the day or like just a couple years ago, you could do X, Y, and Z. You can't do that now. Like in every year now, there's a new strategy for the first 3 rounds of a draft. Pitching is so deep now, or speed is non-existent, or this or that, or the other thing. And so I'm not too surprised to hear you say or talk about the fluctuation of strategy or of results that you've been seeing, just because with all the rule changes that we see in baseball, with the baseball itself changing year in and year out without any prior knowledge of it happening, being able to adapt on the fly has become so much more important and also so much more difficult to do so. Kevin, I can ask you all the same questions. You came out of the strangest season that we've seen in our lifetime, an overall champion. Is there any, and we've talked about this on the show in the past, but like looking back now a little bit further along, is there anything out of the 2020 season that you have been able to recall and be like, hey, listen, that's what helped me. I'm going to make sure I do that again as we head into basically the start of what was the 2020 season last year, or at this point, that could help you along for the second half of the season?
Yeah, 2020 being a shortened season was a very easy year to let guys go. And I told myself going into 2021 that I was going to be more aware of letting guys go and cutting bait sooner rather than later. And I probably did a little better than I had done prior to 2020, but not as well as I would have liked. And I'm still trying to do the same thing now halfway through 2022. I tried not to hold guys too long. Let them go, cut bait, get somebody on my roster. It's especially in NFBC formats where we can change our lineups on Friday. Everything may look so nice on Sunday evening after you check out your FAAB results and you got everybody lined up and you know how you're going to start your lineup and everything's great. But a lot of things can change by Friday. Using up roster spots by not letting guys go and having a couple of guys available on your bench that you are willing to put into your starting lineup is I'm trying to get more and more comfortable doing that.
Yeah, and as we count down the days of the season, that has got to become more easier and easier to do.
Absolutely.
As we talked about John Birdie at the top of the show, are you dropping him or are you keeping him? And both you guys said, hey, I'm probably keeping him. And the major theme of that was, I don't want to see somebody else get him and get any possible stolen bases. On the flip side of that, though, is that you've already banked the 20 some odd stolen bases that he's already put on the board. There's no guarantee he's going to put on that kind of a streak. You have to be, in my mind, you have to be more flexible to let somebody like that go and then hope nobody else reaps the benefits of that, if that's what your team needs. And that's just echoing what you're talking about, Kevin, is like being able to drop guys that aren't a guarantee to help your team, especially in the categories that you might need. Honestly, if you had Birdie this for the entire run, you're probably doing okay in stolen bases here on out. So if you are to drop them, and you could cross your fingers that somebody 7 spots down in that category picks them up, and it's not going to do any harm to you. If anything, it's just going to help because he could cut into somebody else below you who's nipping at your heels. So there's a lot of intricate strategies that you don't have control over when you do a drop like that per se, but you can hope for the best. Jake, I like your point about utilizing the overall categories. And I think that the majority of people who listen to this show understand that the overall categories, the overall standings don't work the same way as the league standings. If you're trying to win your league, obviously you need to pay attention to what especially this time of year and throughout the rest of the year. You have to understand where you can make the most ground to gain the most points in your league to cash, or preferably to win over outright. But the overall, that you can make different types of jumps if you are in that top 25, that top 30, and you're still at the early part of July or mid-July, you still have an opportunity to jump in there. So where do you have to find yourself, I think, in the overall standings to like more weigh the overall standings to make your decisions than to use your league standings?
That's a good question. I guess it depends on how much you're winning your league by. That's a really tough one to say. That's a good question. In 2019, I was winning my league so handily from April on that I was looking at the overall standings in June, July, and really making moves tailored to that. If you're in a hotly contested league, that's tough. Your overall goal is obviously to win that overall and get that 175K if it's the main event. But if you don't cash in your league, if you're playing for that overall and you watch the league slip away, that's worse because you're coming in fourth in your league. You're not cashing in the overalls. I would say at this point of the season, midway through July, top 75, you'd say you probably have a pretty decent chance of at least cashing in that overall standings. But I think I would still focus on my league more so up until you're in like 40th or something like that. That's a good question. It's hard to say. And it also depends on how many categories that you really need to make a jump in those overall standings. If you're way down in saves and that's the thing holding you back in the overall, it's going to be really hard for you to make up a ton of saves and still keep your ground in the Ks and the wins. So it might be better to just focus on the league. That's a really tough one. It's obviously case by case, but it's a good one to think about.
It's one of the worst things to look at your league standings and then to see that like you're in even second, third, or even fourth, but the person right below you is like 10 spots above you in the overall. You're just like, what is going on? I personally just hate seeing them be like, oh, I'm doing so well. But why is Joe Schmo like 2 spots below me in my league, but yet 10 spots above me in the overall? It's so confusing, especially for a rookie player. And I'm playing in NFBC for the last 3 or 4 years now. So I think I've graduated from rookie status per se, at least on the platform, but it still boggles my mind when I look at him like that shouldn't never be right. But obviously the overall is, especially in the very large, even if you're playing in the NFBC 50s or the draft champions, where there's hundreds and hundreds of players playing in that, and most of them have multiple teams in the overall contest. I get it. Mathematically, it makes sense, but I hate seeing it.
Totally agree. And I have that happen to me more often than not.
Yeah.
Means I'm not building balanced enough teams, apparently.
There you go. All right, guys, let's work on balancing our teams here with some decent recommendations for our listeners to hit those categories that they need the most help with. And we will go category by category, three hitting categories or general categories, and then 3 pitching categories. We'll start as we tend to do with our power categories. Kevin, I'm going to start with you. Who are you looking at that could hit a couple bombs, maybe chip in some RBIs we're looking at I guess it's technically a 4-day week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday after the All-Star game.
Yeah, I got a couple of guys here that are pretty heavily rostered in 15-teamers, but available almost everywhere else. G-Man Choi for Tampa, getting a little more playing time than I think some may realize. Only 7 home runs on the season, but 40 RBIs. So he hits in the middle of the lineup most days, and he's putting up the RBI numbers and a fair amount of home runs. And I think that will continue as the season goes on. A big one for me is Carlos Santana. Now, he is available in a few more 15-team main event leagues, almost a quarter of them, available in over 90% of online championships and Yahoo leagues. And since he made the move to Seattle, and even prior to that, he was playing better in June, most of the month of June, while still in Kansas City. But for Seattle now, he's got 4 home runs in 64 plate appearances. And especially in OBP leagues, he's back to his old tricks with OBP 383 since he's back in Seattle. A 245 average. That's about what we expect from Carlos Santana most years. I know he had a couple years where his average was higher than others, but typically we just think of OBP. Carlos Santana is back to being Carlos Santana that we've been accustomed to prior to his injury in 2021. Either of these guys can be of some help going forward. I think I prefer Santana. I think he's got that first base job locked down in Seattle, so he will get a few more plate appearances. Even though Choi is getting most of the run in Tampa, he still sits once in a while. It is Tampa.
Yeah, that's good. Seattle, I mean, their main bats, they do not take them out of the lineup. So I would agree with that.
Choi started the last 8 games straight in the top third of the lineup, did move down to the 4th spot with the return of Brandon Lowe back at second base in the 2-hole. Today, on Saturday, Choi moving down to the 4 holes. If anything, he's still in that top 4 spots of the lineup in more and more RBI opportunities there. So good call out there as well in conjunction with the weird part of me thinks that, is there any possibility that Santana is moved again by the trade deadline by Seattle as they either find themselves out of playoff contention and or are healthy enough to not need Santana anymore?
Entirely possible. They've already had him once and jettisoned him, so he's
right?
not he's not an integral part of their future. I think he was a little bit of Ty France insurance in addition to just getting another bat. He was, now that France is back and healthy, he's expendable. Now, they don't have a ton of heavy bats below him, but they do have Haniger coming back. And Kyle Lewis, maybe he'll rise from the dead at some point. They said end of July, early August. I have no idea what's going on with him at this point. But yeah, he could be gone. It's possible. But they have to keep trying. After last year, they've won 13 straight. Unless they have a dramatic fall off, I think I lean towards him staying around.
In some capacity, yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jake, if not Carlos Santana in Seattle, who might be adding some power to your lineups after the All-Star game?
I feel like it's surprising to me that I noticed Matt Carpenter still is not rostered in all the main event leagues. 83% rostered. So if he's available in your main event, you should be grabbing him. 23% in the OCs and 46% on Yahoo. As we mentioned, there are some teams that have 5 games, and the Yankees are one of them this short week. Even if, and with NFBC, you can have him in your lineup for the 2 games on Thursday and take him out on the weekend if you really wanted to. I don't know why you would, the way he's hitting right now. So he's hitting against most righties, if not all, and even the occasional lefty, despite his platoon splits. They're keeping him in. At this point, you got to grab him and throw him in there because, I mean, he had 2 more homers on Saturday. So guys swinging a hot bat, you got to throw him in and see what you can get.
He's on pace for 90 home runs over a 600 plate appearance season.
Just as we all predicted.
This isn't a guy I'm particularly married to, but He does have a little bit of pop, and he is playing every day. Bryson Stott can cover both middle and field positions, 62% roster in the main event, 16% OC, and 4% on Yahoo. Not prolific in terms of power, but he is hitting 6th or 7th in the Phillies lineup and playing every day at second. At least there's some opportunities. He does have 2 homers in the last couple weeks. Also a deeper league one, maybe more for dailies, but NFBC it works too. Darren Ruff is first base outfield eligible in NFBC. He's 55% rostered main event, but only 6% in the OC, and I didn't get the Yahoo percentage, but I would imagine it's quite low, mainly because he's a short side platoon bat. But when he plays, he's hitting 3rd or 4th in the lineup. The Giants are going to Dodger Stadium next weekend, and they have 4 games there. And the Dodgers also have 3 lefties in their rotation. So there's a large chance that he's playing 3 games out of the 4. And it is the 4th best right-handed power park for homers via StatCast for this year. So Chavez Ravine is a great place to roll out Darren Ruff.
Yeah, 2% rostered across Yahoo. Plenty of opportunity there if you play in those daily leagues.
Yeah, daily leagues, pop them in. And he hit a homer on Saturday, too.
There you go. So maybe that'll tick up.
Off a lefty.
All right, we talked about a lot of speed options in the top of the show in the news section, so let's move into a couple more options here. Kevin, who might be scoring some runs or stealing a bag or 2 in the short week ahead?
This really depends on what happens with Tyrone Taylor. I believe he is starting a rehab assignment as he's recovering from a concussion, but in the meantime, Jonathan Davis has been the everyday center fielder for Milwaukee, and with no power, 0 home runs and 3 RBIs, in 20 games, he has stolen 5 bases, hits out of the 9 spot. So we're not getting a ton of runs either, but he does have 8 in those 20 games. But somebody to keep an eye on, and in conjunction with keeping an eye on what's going on with Tyrone Taylor in his rehab assignment.
I wish the best for Taylor, of course, as he was definitely a flyer on many people's parts, myself included, and a popular ad earlier in the season in those FAAB leagues. But Jonathan Davis, somebody to keep an eye on. Jake, who are you looking at? I see the notes ahead. I know who you're going to say, and I just want to say thank you, because names are important when you're talking about what you are looking for in categories. So I'm hoping anybody listening can already guess who you're going to talk about just by my little clue there. But why don't you go ahead and spoil the surprise?
I bet some people will. I know my consortium boys, Dave and Tony and Marcus, are probably laughing about this one because I've made fun of this one guy because when he came up a little while ago, maybe last year, the year before, I said, everybody's going to pick up Sky Bolt just because of his name. It's really cool. We always add guys that have cool names and spend extra FAAB dollars on them. It's just a running joke with us. But Sky Bolt is playing every day, outfielder for the A's. He's 0% rostered pretty much everywhere, FBC for sure. And he is in the bottom of the order for Oakland, which is not ideal for runs, but he is a guy that will steal a couple bags. He's stolen 2 in the last couple weeks. He's also popped a couple homers in the last couple weeks, so he gives you a little bit of that too. Oakland's another team that's got 5 games in the half week coming up. If you need some extra ABs, and really, Phil Dussault, the winner of all fantasy baseball leagues last year, did teach us that maximizing at-bats and churning through those hitters is something that gets you to the top. And this is a guy that you can do that with. So Skybolt could perhaps bolt his way to a couple steals this weekend.
There it is. Got to end it on
low-hanging
fun right there. Yeah, I know Phil was not in any of my leagues, and somehow he still won 3 of them. So I'm not sure how that works. But yes, from what I've heard, he did very well for himself. All right, our final offensive category, we talk about some opportunity, and we got some schedule notes. As we've alluded to throughout the episode so far, there are a couple teams that have 5 games in the short 4-day week. And that is the Yankees in Houston. They have 2 on Thursday, giving them 5 on the week. Obviously, make note of that as you can switch out your NFBC lineups on Friday, so you can take advantage of that doubleheader on Thursday if your roster is flexible enough to do. Oakland also has 5 as Detroit comes to town for 2 on Thursday as well. So a couple double headers for you to pick and choose from. But Detroit themselves, they are off on Friday, so they only have the 4 to go along with Cleveland and the Chicago White Sox. They have 2 on Saturday. Miami, Texas, San Francisco, and the Dodgers will each play on Thursday. So again, when you are flipping over those rosters, a couple extra at-bats to throw into your lineups in that one-day portion of the week. Soda is the odd man out there with only 2 games to play throughout the course of the shortened week. If at all possible, maybe avoid bidding an extra dollar on those free agents there, unless you're stashing them for the following week. So with all that in mind, and then some, Kevin, who are you taking advantage of for that schedule? As we alluded to a couple of our options throughout so far, who didn't make the list?
Yeah, I think we need to talk a little more about Matt Carpenter. It's crazy as this sounds.
No.
Yeah, it's just been crazy. And I think Jake just alluded to maximizing at-bats, but the reason we're maximizing at-bats is to maximize opportunities for counting stats. And it's only been a couple of weeks since 6 out of 7 consecutive appearances for Matt Carpenter were single plate appearance, pinch hitting appearances. It's only been since July 5th that he's been playing nearly every day, but that most definitely looks to continue. Like Jake said, another 2 home runs on Saturday. And the great thing about this 5-game week for the Yankees next weekend is it's 5 right-handed starting pitchers. At least that's what it appears it will be right now. So absolutely. And I think those lack of plate appearances and at-bats is most definitely why he wasn't already 100% rostered in main events. But I even got him in starting in my 12-team leagues this week. I grabbed him everywhere he was available last week. I was like, as I put it in my article, this isn't funny anymore. It's negligent not to pay attention to what's going on here. So I'm just seconding Jake's Matt Carpenter pick here, but the opportunity is great this coming week.
It is nuts to see so many leagues in the main event pass on what he's been doing, even as a flyer. So to see 15 teams all get together and just boycott Matt Carpenter and what he's been doing in multiple groups of 15 people. You just think that there's going to be at least one, if not multiple people being like, all right, yeah, I'll bite. Let's see where this is going. But to see that happen in multiple leagues actually is extremely surprising. And I look forward to having the same exact conversation next week.
Yeah, the main event rostership will go to 100% this weekend. And the online championship will be at least double, if not triple, the 23% it is right now.
We'll
Especially
see.
once people see all the pickup on the scheduling. 5 games, even at 12. Yeah, you got to grab that.
All right, Jake. If not Matt Carpenter, if Matt Carpenter's not available, who might you be looking at to take advantage of the opportunity ahead?
I'll stick with his teammate. Now, he is fully rostered in the main event. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, a shortstop for the Yankees as well. But he is still available in 19% of OC leagues, online championships, and he's only 18% rostered on Yahoo right now. So if you need a little bit of speed, and he is hitting for average right now, 341 in July. Granted, he's at the bottom of the Yankees lineup, but it's still the Yankees lineup. So there's plenty of opportunity for a few runs, even at the bottom of that lineup with Judge hitting homers and everything else going on there. Digging into the bargain bin a little bit, Elvis Andrus, another team with 5 games. The A's are going to be versus playing against Detroit and Texas, so not elite starters by any stretch. He's been playing every day, hitting 5th or 6th for the A's. Not a great offense, but still an opportunity for some RBIs. He's popped a couple homers the last couple of weeks as well. He's only 13% rostered in the main event and pretty much unowned everywhere else. So give that one a shot if you need some middle infield help. This is the deepest reach of the night, and this is only on the off chance that Nolan Arenado has to take more time off with his sore back. But the future Hall of Famer and all-star Albert Pujols, he's unowned everywhere, but the Cardinals do go to, do I have it wrong? They going to Fenway or are they going somewhere else? Where are they going?
Cincinnati.
That's my bad. Okay. Cincinnati's still top 2, I believe, for right-handed power. If Arenado has to go on the IL, you can throw Pujols in there because they were playing him when he was sitting out injured.
We got to be careful. Pujols not only is an all-star, he's also a home run derby
participant. Yes.
And so we'll make sure he doesn't get
Gotta
hurt
see
back
him
from
throw his
carrying
back out.
everybody.
Yeah.
He's going to carry the ratings, and it might hurt his back from that one. He might have to sit out a couple of games to start the return of the regular season. Yeah, all right, I like it. I like the very deep cut there, and that's enough. It's enough bad talk.
Pretty much don't bother with that one.
On Albert. All right, let's move on to our pitching categories then, guys. We are going to go ahead and skip our future two-start starting pitcher because I'm not going to do that.
No.
I don't think any of us want to guess on
coming
that
out of the break
one.
too.
Just look who's going to start on Thursday or Friday and take a stab at those guys if that's an option, as they probably will start on Monday or Tuesday the following week. Let's move into this week for our counting categories for pitchers, guys. Wins and Ks. Kevin, who is going to add into those counting stats for you this coming week or beyond?
I like a couple of guys. One that is not rostered at all anywhere, Garrett Hill for Detroit. He's had one bad outing, one good outing, but he gets Oakland, who is by far the worst hitting team versus right-handed pitching in the league. They have a 587 team OPS versus right-handed pitching. So we look for this to be one of the good outings. The strikeouts have not been there in his 2 major league starts, but in 69 2/3 innings pitched at AA and AAA prior to being called up this season, he did have 98 strikeouts in those 69 2/3. So the strikeouts could be there as well. Most definitely, I think there's a chance for a win for Detroit versus Oakland with the right-handed pitcher on the mound. And then Braxton Garrett for Miami. He gets a team that's not much better against left-handed starting pitching in the Pittsburgh Pirates. And he's had a couple of good outings thus far for Miami. So I like Braxton Garrett and Garrett Hill.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, this is like pretty much the only week of the year where you're fabbing on guys not for the 2-start. Like you can't fab for the 2-start starters, obviously, with only 5 games at most on the docket for any given team. And so you can be a little bit more picky about your matchup plays here, and you can spread out your money a little bit more, and just to get that almost not so much guaranteed, but as close to guaranteed victory as you look at those matchups rather than just talent alone.
There's also fewer guys to choose from. So it's much easier this week to take a look at each and every starter that you think is going to be taking the mound for the coming week.
Yeah. As much as we do try to predict the teams that have 3 games, we can say, okay, they're going to throw their top 3 starters, but they don't all do that. So it's best not even trying to guess with those teams unless you're trying to play for the 2 starts the following week. You can look ahead and try to guess that, but there's a chance that they use that 4th starter on Sunday instead of on Monday of the next week because one guy pitched in the All-Star game or one guy, they wanted to limit his innings, so they decided to push him back. And that's all going to happen, and it's all going to come out on Wednesday after the All-Star game or Thursday morning or something like that.
Teams also have
there are some guesses. So
you have more flexibility to do a bullpen game early on in a series because obviously everybody's bullpen is well rested after a 4-day off week. So a lot of variables going into this short week for sure. All right, Jake, who are you looking at then? If you don't have an option for 2-start pitchers, who are you looking at to add in wins and Ks or a win in maybe a few Ks for this?
Yeah, that's right. With the guys I'm throwing out there, that's it, a few Ks. I'll toss Kyle Freeland out there, who's not a sexy name, but he is out of Coors where he is a 1.5 better ERA on the season, just north of 4. So it's not anything to write home about, but against a Milwaukee team that's putting up a 287 WOBA and an 81 WRC plus against lefties in July, it's not a bad shot to take. Thanks. He's 11% rostered in main event and only 6 in the OC and 5 on Yahoo. So he's pretty widely available. probably just a one-time thing. Also note, Rony Garcia is coming back for Detroit. If not Sunday, it'll be the following week. He is the Sunday after the All-Star break, I should say. He's making a rehab start Sunday, the 17th, when this pod will drop. And if all goes well, it's likely that's the only rehab start he's going to make. So he could take the ball on Sunday or even Saturday for Detroit because their rotation's really thin right now. And they do have that doubleheader on Thursday, so they got 5 games. So that's a guy, he's 0% rostered everywhere. He's a guy I did have on a couple teams at one point right before he got hurt. So he's not a high K guy, also not going to give you a ton of length, but it's a name to look at in 15s if you need some starting pitcher depth.
Being interesting, I don't know if it's worth the squeeze, but it'd be an interesting research article to do about the guys like Ronnie, like you mentioned, you had Ronnie Garcia before he got hurt, you dropped him. If you end up with him in FAAB, how often does that happen where the team that had a guy like that drop him and then they're the ones that end up picking him up because they're either the only team in the league that believes in him or they just believe in him a little bit more than everybody else because they were willing to draft him. And yeah. So Jake, I'll be checking in with you to see how many leagues you ended up with Garcia.
Okay. I only had him in 2 before, but hopefully I don't end up with him in 6 because that means I'm in dire straits.
There you go. Let's talk about how we are going to consider chipping away at our ratios, guys. There are ratio categories to consider. Your ERA and your WHIP. We will get to our saves, our last counting category later. But for now, Kevin, who's possibly chipping away at those ratios for you?
As we talked last week, and probably will a little more before this episode is over as well, I like quite a few relievers going into this short week. It's highly unlikely that we're going to have enough starting pitchers scheduled to throw over the weekend that we won't need an extra reliever or 2. I like Matt Brash and what he's been doing since he came back to Seattle and has been working out of the bullpen. He's had 3 appearances, no earned runs, 4 strikeouts, and 3 1/3 innings. And if they do start to stretch him out again, and he's made some changes to improve upon what we saw in his 3rd, 4th, and 5th starts of the season after everyone was so excited, people dropped a lot of FAAB money on Matt Brash earlier this season.
Mm-hmm.
Now he'll be basically free this weekend. He's got 3 scoreless appearances under his belt. He'll probably have to have a few more before they begin, but if he's got some stuff figured out, they could stretch him out again. And this is a thing that, I'm getting him this weekend to use instead of a 6th or 7th starter for the week. But if things go well, I might hold on to him another week and see what happens. Maybe they do start to stretch him out here.
Man, I had so much Matt Brash. He was such a downer. I was drafting him in Vegas, 26th, 27th round. And then after that in the mains, he was going, once he made the rotation officially, he was going in the 16th, 15th round. I thought I was king of the world. And then it all crashed down very quickly.
Burned.
I had him on over half my teams, and I didn't spend the FAAB on him, thank God, but I did spend the draft capital.
Draft capital, sure. Yeah, I thought I was super smart grabbing him. I'm like, everybody's talking about, at least in TGFBI, he was going for $300-$400 in that first FAAB year. I'm like, oh, you don't. I think I just saved my entire league $300 or $400 FAAB dollars because I drafted him in the 30th round, and I felt really good about myself. Very altruistic of me.
All right, Dave McDonald got him in Glarf, the league that we're in together, Adam, and he saved me from spending the FAAB on him because we drafted that league in beginning of March. I just ended up with the consolation prize of Kevin Smith for almost $100. So that one worked out really well for me too.
Exactly how you planned it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks, Dave. All right. Again, if not Matt Brash, then Jake, who are you looking at? The chipawation ratios. I think that Kevin's point, and we talked about this in the first week of the season as well, is worth echoing in the fact that with the shortened week, it may be behoove of you guys who are listening to be looking at these ratio chippers, these relievers in most situations, to being your final pitcher on your rotation for this short week, because you may not have enough starters in your FAAB leagues to fill all those spots and you don't want to take zeros, especially in your pitching spots in your
Definitely
rotations.
not.
Without further ado, Jake, who are you looking at?
Yeah, we'll stay in the same bullpen. Andres Munoz is still not fully rostered in the main event. He's only at 64%, way lower than that in the 12-teamers, 9% in the OCs, 14% on Yahoo. All he's done in the last month plus is throw 16 2/3 innings with 0 earned, a .63 whip, and 32 Ks. Would that interest you in the short week?
That seems good. I would like to hear more.
Okay. That's all I got. So pick them up.
That's all I need.
You're probably not getting any saves out of them. Diego Castillo and Paul Sewald have that locked down. They have that committee going, but there's definitely a chance for a win or two. He hasn't had any since June 10th, which was the arbitrary date that I just happened to pull from, but certainly could sneak one in. Any reliever
and
can sneak
Seattle
in a win.
did trade their closer at the deadline last year, in spite being on a winning streak and in contention as they are as we approach this deadline.
And you could see the stuff, you could see the future closer label that Munoz had. They traded for him injured. They made a point to get him and rehab him, and he's going to be a fixture in that pen for quite a while.
We're talking about possible save opportunities, so we'll move right into that. We'll jump on our segue and go into our final pitching category. That is everybody's favorite, and that is saves. So Jake, we'll go right back into you then. Who are you looking to actually get saves for you in the short week and maybe beyond?
Yeah, more low-hanging fruit for me. I'll start with Kyle Finnegan. Tanner Rainey is done. He's on the 60-day IL. Sprained UCL, I think it was. I don't recall exactly, but irrelevant. He's out for the year. That bullpen has nobody else pretty much. He's only 4% rostered in the main event, 3 in OC, and 15% on Yahoo, and that's because everybody's been picking him up on Yahoo since the news came out. Everybody. Well, only 15% of everybody, but it's going to be the big
Everybody's
bid for
still
saves
paying
this
attention.
weekend. Yeah. Anybody that wants to roster the Washington closer.
There you go.
Rainey didn't have a ton of save ops, and he didn't do that well with the ones that he had. I don't know how many saves you can hope to get from Finnegan, but any pretty much undisputed closer on a team should be owned, despite how bad the team is. Now, the rotation's bad. The bullpen's bad. Any closer still should be rostered because the chance is there. And he showed he can get it done a little bit last year. The ERA is nothing to write home about, but he's got the experience, and that matters to managers. Alexis Diaz I'll also throw out there, although I alluded to my consortium boys before, Dave, Tony, and Marcus, and we have a nickname for David Bell, and it's the clown. We don't write his name in our text thread. We just use the clown emoji when we refer to David Bell, because Cincinnati, I don't think, is ever going to have a designated closer, but Hunter Strickland has gone back to doing Hunter Strickland things, and Alexis Diaz seems like he has the makeup to close. He's got about a 30% K rate, 31.5% K rate, but the walk rate is pretty high, so it's not something you want from a closer. But again, it's another bullpen that doesn't have a lot of options. Art Warren is hurt and been terrible. I think Lucas Sims might be dead. Reaver San Martin, they're not going to be using in that situation too often, although David Bell could throw him in there again once in a while. But I think I would want to bet on Alexis Diaz getting about 60% of the saves or so for that bullpen. And 40% rostered main event for him, 7% OCs, and 14% on Yahoo. So he's widely available in 12s and in a lot of 15s. And don't forget about Joe Barlow hanging out down there. He is hurt. He had a blister issue. They put him on the IL after being removed from the closer role. And it looks like Brett Martin is the preferred option for the manager, Woodward, but look and see if Joe Barlow was dropped. I know he's been dropped in a few main event leagues. He's only 89% rostered there, 78% in the OC, and 44% in Yahoo. The Yahoo guys and girls dumped him pretty quickly. Check and see if he's out there, because honestly, I don't think he was pitching that poorly. The peripherals were fine. I think once he's healthy, he gets that job back in short order, I would think. So if you have room to stash it.
Yeah, the timing of that blister and that IL stint and the corresponding removal of the closer title seemed to be really close, and I'm wondering if there was a precursor to that blister coming forth, and just because he didn't really pitch at all since being removed from the closer role before being put onto the IL. I wonder if the injury had anything to do with the removal, and if that's the case, your theory could be spot on, where once he is fully healthy, maybe he gets eased into it, but it looks like he could go right back into that role.
I think he's the preferred choice. And
Yeah.
Leclerc has come back and he's looked terrible, so it's not going to be him.
I'm shocked. Not that shocked. All right. All right, Kevin, we'll end here in the final pitching category with you. Who are you looking at for some saves that Jake didn't mention?
Yeah, and it goes back to the previous category as well. These guys are all relievers that I'd be more than happy to put in my lineup this coming weekend. And when the weekend's over, we're only 2 weeks from the trade deadline. And some of these teams, closers they have been using will be on the move, probably not getting saves anymore, most definitely not for the teams they're on now. So I like Will Crow in Pittsburgh. He's been racking up the holds recently. AJ Puck in Oakland, even if Oakland is not able to get anything for Trevino, he might be done in Oakland. AJ Puck has been amazing, as we thought all season long he could be in this role, and gradually getting higher and higher leverage situations. He has been the 8th inning guy as of late, definitely next in line. Detroit has several guys that could all be on the move, and we could make our way all the way back to Joe Jimenez being back to the guy in Detroit, as he seemed to be a couple of years ago. Michael Gibbons in Chicago at David Robertson is moved. And I would bring up with that Texas situation, Jonathan Hernandez is back from the IL as well to be in that mix. Although I do agree with Jake that Barlow will get the first shot when healthy. But all kinds of these with the teams lower in the standings that can get something for their relievers, they're going to do it. There's going to be a lot of opportunities in a couple of weeks.
And we all loved Hernandez when Leclerc was blowing up. We said it was going to be Hernandez, and he just fell on his face. So
I think he went out for the year like 2 or 3 days after Leclerc did. We were all excited, and then he went down as well. Yeah.
Insult to injury, or injury to insult, I guess, in that scenario. Trevino's been fine for, I can't imagine that they don't get something for him, even if it's just like a bag of balls and a baseball bat. And so I like the Puck, but Danny Jimenez is still on the IL for them, and he could return and reclaim that. Whether or not he comes back and then he's traded himself as well. Puck's obviously, I'm going to say obviously, but it is the A's after all. But Puck's the one that's probably not getting traded out of that bullpen. So I think that's a safe stash if you're looking at Oakland.
Unless it's in a package for Juan Soto, of course.
Yeah. That's a whole podcast. So let's just take a package from every team.
A's will make that
Soto.
big run. Yeah.
Here is a $445 million check plus AJ Puck. That should be fine. All right. End it here with our best category here, and it's our wild card, our speculative ad section, our bench stashes, our IL stashes, our possible prospect call-ups, because we seem to be getting them every week throughout the course of the season. Kevin, I'm gonna let you start it off here. We'll end with Jake. Who are you stashing for the All-Star game?
One of the few bright spots for NFBC players anyway that came out of the Kansas City Royals situation this weekend is we have a few players that were not available to us to stash that are now. They got their game played, so they are available to pick up and stash if you have a spot. Now, when it comes to Kansas City and stashing players that weren't previously available, the one that comes to everybody's mind is probably Nick Pratto. However, unless they do something way more than I think they're going to do at the deadline or something unexpected, Hunter Dozier and Ryan O'Hearn even are both still there. So I don't see that imminent. But the one, if Whit Merrifield is moved, is the one I briefly alluded to earlier in the show. Michael Massey could be the new second baseman for the Kansas City Royals if that happens. He's got 15 home runs and 12 stolen bases, hitting well over 300 at AA and AAA combined this season. Got his first start on Saturday, went 2 for 4, was not overwhelmed with the opportunity. And he's a guy that it was more likely than it ever has been before that Whit Merrifield was going to be traded, and now it's probably even more likely. So this is a distinct possibility.
Just not to an AL East team, probably.
Well, he'll do it for them.
But yeah. Didn't Benintendi say that?
No, it was Whit Merrifield. He said,
Oh, it was. Okay.
For a contender to go play a playoff game in Toronto, that they'd consider it.
Interesting take. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. All right, Jake. If not one of these Kansas City rookies that are being called up this weekend, who might you be stashing if the price is right for this coming week?
I'll take Mr. Hastings' lead and go with a homer pet project. Guardians starting pitcher Cody Morris. This is one for James Anderson. That's one of his guys as well. We have a lot of Cody Morris on our draft champions team, so when he got injured in spring, it was pretty upsetting to us. But he is back. He's throwing in the Arizona Complex League now. He has started in games there, which will build up into a minor league rehab stint very soon. The Guardians have an opening. Aaron Savelli's down. I don't think it's going to be for long, but before the year started, Morris was the next man up, and he has got the talent to overtake Savali if his struggles continue, because he was not exactly pitching like a worthwhile major league starter this year. Last year in AAA, he had a 18.9% swinging strike rate. He's always been a high strikeout guy, pretty much everything. At AA and AAA, he had almost a 13% K per nine, 36% K percentage. And not with an exorbitantly high walk rate either. His walk rates were under 9%. It's a guy that's got good enough control and really good stuff. And we know how Cleveland develops their starting pitching and they don't often have guys that have this kind of stuff either. A lot of their guys are your Savalis and your Plesacks and even your Biebers, who had to learn how to elevate his stuff by leaning away from his fastball a little bit. This guy's got all of the stuff to succeed as an upper level SP2, SP3 at the least. It's not a stash for a 12. If it's a league that you can IL stash and he isn't already stashed, then it's a guy I would grab and throw on that IL because he should be built up by mid-August, I would say, at the latest, and could be a guy that helps you down the stretch.
Yeah, it's nice to look at some of these younger pitchers that what Seattle's doing with George Kirby and managing his innings and setting him down. Pirates doing with Rudy Contreras, same thing. I'm talking to our head-to-head folks out there, like, you don't necessarily have that concern with somebody like Morris, who he basically just ramping himself up right now as opposed to trying to get through an entire season. He still could be valuable come playoff time in August, September, and what have you. And so you don't have the same kind of concerns about this kind of a young pitcher as you do with one that is trying to make the jump from, say, 100 innings to 150 innings, or has any kind of innings cap, as we talked about with Brian Bayo a couple weeks ago, Kevin. So something to consider there when you're looking at guys who are trying to ramp themselves up back from either injury or late starts of the season or what have you. So a little bit more value in those kind of scenarios as well.
That's a good point.
Kevin, let's end it off with any All-Star Weekend related words of wisdom you have for everybody.
Just work on your teams this weekend. It's a week off. We do get a little bit of break for a couple days, but especially this year with those couple of double headers on Thursdays, there's some things we can do to get an advantage, even if it's only for 4 or 5 days. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, and don't fall asleep at the wheel and hope that other people are.
Exactly.
That's ultimately what it comes down to. All right, Jake, I want to thank you once again, man, for joining us this week. Could you let everybody know what you do and where you do it?
You can find me on Twitter at the Dust Mite. I do the 2-star pictures for rotosaurus.com. You can find them at rotosaurus.com, and in the menu bar at the top, you'll see 2-star pictures. We do them for the next week and also the following week. So what you guys do on the show, you give a couple of those following week 2-starters. We give a whole list. That's something that I like to do on either Saturday or Sunday morning and get it up there before Sunday afternoon so you have them for your FAAB. So you can bid a lot less dollars on those guys that are likely to start in the following week. We've been doing that for almost a decade now. It's something we started doing a long time ago, and it's a valuable tool for a lot of people. So you can check that out. That's the majority of what I do. We are going to restart the High Stakes Heat podcast. It is It's been a long time. We haven't done it since March. And that's mostly on me because Dave McDonald, my co-host, my partner, he's doing plenty of other things, and he has stuff to occupy his time with FWFB and Justin Mason on that pod. So he's at least had some time to shout into the microphone, and we're going to give him a little bit more time to do that as well, likely starting next week.
All right, so make sure you are keeping an eye out for that. Subscribe now so that it's already in your feed to High Stakes Heat. And you make sure you're getting a lot more Jake, and we'll throw in some Dave as well. Dave can use some ear holes to throw his voice into.
Yeah, he doesn't get enough publicity. Yeah,
exactly. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this episode 68 of On the Wire. Please make sure to subscribe, share, and review the podcast wherever you're listening. We will be back, of course, every Sunday with detailed FAAB breakdowns throughout the 2022 season. Of course, keep a lookout for Kevin's companion article over at pitcherlist.com. Comes out every Sunday afternoon as well. You can follow myself on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin is at HastingKevin. And of course, follow the pod itself at On the Wire Pod. I'd like once again to thank our guest Jake Halusker for joining us. Follow him at The Dust Mite. With that, I am Adam Howe, and on behalf of Kevin Hasting, thanks for listening. With that, we bid you goodbye.